Hello, I'm State Representative Justin Simmons of the 131st District, and welcome to my legislative report. Today, we are at the Mack Truck Museum and are joined by Don Shoemaker, who is the curator here at the museum. How are you doing today, Don?
I'm fine, how are you?
Good, good. Thanks for being with us. Can you tell me a little bit about the history of Mack and the history of this museum?
Okay, Mack Trucks has been in existence for the entire history of the trucking and heavy vehicle industry in the world. We are the oldest heavy vehicle manufacturer in the United States. Actually, this is our 114th year. So we've seen trucking go from, or transportation go from horse-drawn vehicles all the way up to today's trucks that run as passenger car. So there's been a tremendous amount of evolution and development in those years. Mack, as you may know, was founded by some brothers, Mack brothers, who actually were born and raised here in eastern Pennsylvania near Scranton. But as they left the farm back in when they were 14 years old, after 8th grade, they pursued their own interests. In coming years, 5 of them wound up being back together and being part of this corporation, the Mack Brothers Motor Car Company at that time. Several of them, Jack Mack, the first president and the leader of the group, became interested in steam power, and so when they bought out a wagon and carriage facility, they immediately started to look at motorizing or making them self-propelled. And so early efforts were steam. After that, they tried electric power. But then in 1900, they sold their first self-propelled tour bus to a tour operator in Prospect Park in Brooklyn, New York. And of course, you could say, well, and the rest is history. But they did establish some philosophies and practices that have allowed Mack to flourish and remain for this long period of time.
Great.
If you look at the industry, there have been as many as 556 truck manufacturers in the United States. Today, we are, depending on how you count, we have 6. So, why did a company started by 5 guys who had 8th grade educations, why did they survive when 550 other companies did not? We can explain all that. In fact, part of the explanations are that being not well-versed engineers, they tended to over-design things and make sure that things would not fail, that it exceed the needs of the job.
Okay.
The other was that right in the beginning, they established the philosophy that if you buy a Mack Brothers vehicle, it should be entirely Mack. You should have a Mack engine, a transmission, axles, everything should be Mack. And so those things set us apart from everybody else at that time. It's only in recent years that other companies in the United States are accepting the fact that it would be better if you designed all the components of the vehicles so that they work well together. So yes, those philosophies, of course, the philosophy of integrated design has allowed the Mack company to be innovative throughout the years, to do things that were thinking outside of the box, do it more quickly and successfully. These are all things that allowed us to be a forerunner in the industry.
What made you start the Mack Truck Museum in this location where you're located here?
Well, of course, the idea of a museum, we can go back to that a little bit, but of course, Mack, even back in the 50s, 60s, it was obvious, that we were the oldest company at that time. And of course, in the 70s, there was interest in establishing a truck museum here in Allentown. At first, it was intended to be all brands of trucks. However, that project never came to being. But along the way, we became part of the establishment of America on Wheels Museum here in the city of Allentown. But in between there, in 1984, the Mack Trucks Incorporated established or founded a corporation, a nonprofit corporation, the Mack Truck Historical Museum. Of course, we were fortunate in that the company had saved a lot of archival material, vehicles, and whatever that would establish a very nice museum. So in 1984, we did open our first museum in Macungie, Pennsylvania.
Okay.
And later in the early 90s, we moved the museum into the Mack assembly plant at Macungie. When floor space became needed in the plant, we left the plant in 1998, moved to a location off of Postal Road over at the Lehigh Valley International Airport. Of course, that was intended to be a temporary move, but in 2010, when testing operations were relocated and a decision made to have a Mack Customer Center, it was obvious that the museum should be a part of the Mack Customer Center. Of course, the logic is that all Mack customers and the public should be able to see Mack from its very beginning to its current vehicles all in one location. And that's what the Mack Museum is today.
How many people do you employ?
We have a staff, all of our staff are retired Mack employees from all different disciplines in the company. We have 7 of us that do the bulk of the archival work and some of the tour work, and then we have usually 6 other tour guides who work fewer hours but specialize in giving tours. The local chapter of Antique Truck Club of America has several people who come in on a weekly basis and on a monthly basis and spend hundreds and hundreds of hours here in the museum in a year. That's very important to us, because everything we have in the museum we would like to believe is a runner. You should be able to start it. Some start better than others, but everything we have is a running vehicle.
Are there any plans for the future for this facility?
But as time goes by, each day that goes by, more history occurs, and so we have to absorb that in one way or another. It could be in the form of archival material. It could be in the form of vehicles or components or whatever. But we do absorb them. So we have this continuous expansion of the collection.
On average, how many people would you say visit this museum per year, and general idea of where they come from?
Well, in a typical year, we would be as many as 9,000 visitors will come through here. Where they come from, everybody from right down the street to anywhere in the world. We have a large Mack is very fortunate, having had a lot of exposure throughout the world in the world wars. Mack was the primary supplier for heavy vehicles for the Allies in both wars. And so we have places like the Netherlands that actually has a fan club, a Mack fan club, and they religiously come to the United States and visit us every year. And we have other people from other countries, starting to get more people from the Eastern European countries, Russia, a lot from Australia, you name it. Certainly many Canadians, yes.
Wow. What type of exhibits does the museum have?
The exhibits that people remember most, I guess, are the vintage vehicles. Our oldest vehicle is actually built in 1909 tour bus, but it is the oldest Mack that exists. It still runs, has a very colorful and involved history, and it was subject of Ripley's Believe It or Not in 1944, but that is here, it's in our Heritage Center. And we go through all kinds of vehicles, Mack models, all the way up to the 1980s. Of course, that process of 114 years has been a continuous evolution. So it's kind of interesting to look at that evolution, how it interfaced with development of roads and the traffic conditions and the needs of the people.
Do you partner with any other museums or collaborate for exhibits?
We collaborate very much with America on Wheels Museum. We have 8 or 9 vehicles on display there from our collection, and a lot of memorabilia and things like that. That is our close end. We serve on committees and on the board and everything, so we're very close to them. We feel that having the 2 museums in Allentown is definitely a plus in attracting people to the city, visitors to the city. We do work with a lot of other museums on a vehicle or a display basis. Museums all the way from Connecticut to California to all over. And as far as supplying information and display material. We do have a project right now where the Pennsylvania State Museum, where they would like to renew or establish a transportation display on the second floor in 2015. And we are working to help them get the appropriate vehicle and get it in place. And so that will be a physical thing for us.
Anything else you'd like to add today?
Well, the Mack Museum is really an interesting place to come, not just because I'm here, but we get a lot of compliments from visitors in that it's kind of a hands-on museum. And our tours, all our visitors are, we prefer that they be accompanied by a tour guide. And the tour guide, our tours are on a dialogue basis. It's a question and answer, and we look at your areas of interest and try to make the tour flow in that direction. And so we get very good compliments from that respect.
Can you take us to other places in the museum and talk about some of the other things that you have?
Sure, we have a lot of things to look at, and why don't we just take a walk?
Sure. We're in the sound room right now. Can you tell us a little bit about what the sound room is?
Okay, a lot of things that have to do with vehicles are driven by legislation or proposed legislation. Of course, at one time, back in the 60s, it was thought that trucks should be as quiet as passenger cars, and that presented a very large project. This room was designed at that time, and what's unique about the room is that it is free of echoes and the ambient noise level is very, very low. So if we brought a truck in here and ran it, anything we measured was coming from its source. So we could find the source quickly, identify it, make adjustments, and reevaluate. Of course, the one that the enforcing officer is going to get you for is outside on the road, so the qualifying tests were done in the outside conditions. Today, of course, we don't do testing here in the facility anymore, but this makes a very nice room for displaying vintage vehicles.
We're in the Heritage Center room here. Can you tell us a little bit about this room?
Okay, when you visit this room, and we take you through this room, you can get a very good idea of where Mack has been and what Mack has been all about for the last almost 14 years. With the timeline that is on the far wall, it can take you through the various decades, periods of our history, and in some of the other things that are in the room. One of the interesting items in this room, of course, is the oldest Mack that exists that we talked about before, tour bus, representing the very earliest technology with solid rubber tires, wooden spoke wheels, chain drive, everything that was involved in the earliest technology.
That's fascinating. For the general public, there's obviously so much here to see. What are your hours during the week for the public to come out?
The Mack Museum is open to the public on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays from 10 in the morning till 4 o'clock in the afternoon. And we try to have guided tours and try to start them on the hour if possible.
Great, Don. It's been a fascinating interview, and there's obviously so much to see here at this museum, and I would encourage all my constituents to come out to it, and thank you.
You're welcome.
And that's all the time we have today for our legislative report. I'm State Representative Justin Simmons, and invite you to join me again next time. Thank you.